Hello, everyone. My name is Atul Bahl, and I'm Vice President of Cloud Infrastructure at Verisk Analytics.
Hi guys, and I'm Philip Galea, Director of Engineering at Wood Mackenzie. Today, we're going to do a quick presentation on the fragmented customer identity moving to a unified shared service model. We're going to talk a little bit about how our teams have collaborated on numerous technology projects and initiatives, working with Atul, sitting at the centre, the corporate centre, and myself leading the technology team at one of the Verisk family of companies, Wood Mackenzie, and specifically looking at customer identity being one of our initiatives. So Atul will take you through the agenda.
Thanks, Philip. So quickly, let's go through the agenda, what we'll be talking about today. We'll start off with an introduction into Verisk, as well as Wood Mackenzie, one of our member companies. We'll then dive into the history of Okta at Verisk, which began several years ago as a workforce use case and has evolved recently into the customer identity use case. We'll dive deeper into the architecture of Okta and specifically how Wood Mackenzie is leveraging the platform, as well as how we are managing it centrally. And then we'll talk a bit more about our successes, challenges, lessons learned, and we'll wrap it up with an outlook over the next 12 months, followed with some Q&A. So Verisk Analytics, we are a data analytics provider, and we service three industry verticals: insurance, energy, and financial services. In short, we help our customers make better decisions using our analytics and insights. We've been doing this for nearly 50 years now, and we have presence in 30 countries across the globe. Now, what's really relevant for the conversation today is that Verisk is a family of operating companies, or what we like to call member companies, Wood Mackenzie being one of them, and we grow very aggressively through acquisition. And as a result, we have a fair amount of autonomy at the member company layer and more of a decentralized corporate hierarchy. So as a result, there's a certain nuance between what's driven by the center and what's handled at the member company level. And this is true across all business functions, but certainly it applies to technology and customer identity, which is what we're talking about today. Also important to note is that we are in the midst of our own cloud journey across the enterprise. What that means for Verisk is that we're on a mission to migrate all workloads from on-premises data centers to the cloud, whether that's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, a mix of all of the above. And most certainly, we have a cloud-first mindset for all new initiatives. Specifically, what that means for the identity use case is that we see it as an opportunity not only to leverage the benefits of the cloud, but also as an opportunity to rethink the way we have done things in the past and to really present ourselves in a more unified way across the enterprise. I'll hand it back to Philip now, who will talk a little bit more about Wood Mackenzie.
Thanks, Atul. So a little bit of history around about Wood Mackenzie. Wood Mackenzie's heritage and reputation was really formed around about North Sea oil and gas in the early 1970s. As the organisation has grown over the years, various ownership and funding rounds, our breadth and depth of coverage has grown as well. So we now cover the interconnected industries of metals, mining, chemicals, power, renewables, and commodities globally. In 2015, Wood Mackenzie was acquired by Verisk, and we became part of the Verisk family of companies, or member companies, as Atul referred to them as. This, I think, combined organisation has certainly made Wood Mackenzie stronger. It's made us able to really accelerate on our ambitions and to grow in our markets. Most of our business is really through our online tools, our fiscal models, our web applications, and our APIs. So we're very web orientated. In late 2018, we launched what we call Wood Mackenzie Lens. It's our new cloud-based analytical platform, and that was quickly followed by Lens Direct in early 2019. And that is really to provide our customers with direct access to our data and ultimately transform our business to be better positioned for the faster pace of the digital age. And I think a key thing of all of this is really through the combined efforts. We've really worked hard with the centre, and we've worked really hard to drive that successful adoption of Okta for both our workforce and as you'll see in our next slides, through the customer offerings. I will hand off back to Atul for the next piece.
Great. So I would assume that most, if not all, customers of Okta began with a very similar story, and it was the workforce use case. And that's certainly the case here at Verisk. We enabled SSO to a few SaaS platforms early on. In our case, it was back around 2015. ServiceNow being the first, followed soon after by Office 365. But over the years, this has grown to a library of well over 500 applications across our cloud footprint. And more importantly, it's evolved from what used to be considered an optional feature, a nice to have, into a de facto mandate for any type of corporate access into our growing cloud ecosystem. We certainly see it as an enabler for secure cloud adoption. We can't really imagine how any of this would work without that layer in between. It's also been a enabler for securely managing our cloud footprint as we manage largely in AWS and other cloud providers as well. So we securely access our infrastructure that we're building in the cloud, as well as securely accessing the applications that we consume via SaaS. Also very important to us, we found it to be a very unifying platform. As I mentioned earlier, we are a family of companies. We grow aggressively through acquisition. So Okta is certainly an enabler for the M&A IT integrations, and it's a way to unify all the various identities that exist across a wide range of directories internally, unifying that and then presenting ourselves as one Verisk identity out to the world. So as we thought through this a bit more, we started to wonder, can we use the same platform to solve a similar challenge on the customer identity side? Where again, we have applications scattered about, directories and users dispersed, not very unified. And at the same time, we do have a fair amount of overlapping customers. So from their perspectives, they may think of us as dozens of different applications and URLs to remember, when in fact, we really are one company. So how can we make that a bit better, not only for the customer, but for ourselves? So we think through this a bit more, what really drove us down this journey. Certainly there were technical drivers, and those are pretty much the same drivers that lead us towards any type of cloud adoption. And that is, consuming a platform rather than building infrastructure, managing that infrastructure, keeping up with the latest features that are expected of us in this rapidly evolving space of identity. Why would we want to build and manage that where we can instead consume it? And when you think further about our cloud journey, being in a hybrid cloud state and a multi-cloud state, stripping away that identity layer certainly made a lot of sense. So for technical reasons, going down this path made sense for us, and it was very apparent to us. But I wanted to focus a little bit here on some of the business drivers. What Okta gives us here is the ability to span across business units, so to break down some of those silos that I alluded to earlier. It would help us unify the customer experience and the user experience, whereas right now it's very inconsistent depending on which entry point you have into our world, and to present more of a unified Verisk-wide experience for our customers. That in turn improves our ability for customer analytics with all the rich metadata and data that we gather from our customer logins and authentications. Whereas right now that would have to be stitched together from many, many different repositories. And then finally, it certainly strengthens our security posture, which in turn improves our product as we take it to market. So using modern authentication methods, multi-factor authentication, federation, this only enhances the product. It protects the very sensitive data that we host, and it overall improves the product as we offer it to the marketplace. Now, how we did this wasn't via some top-down mandate. That doesn't really work very well at Verisk, due to the nature of how we're structured. So the approach we took was more of a community model. We call it a community of interest. Early on, like-minded individuals got together and we just started talking. We started meeting regularly, sharing ideas, potential challenges, potential solutions to challenges, eventually sharing code snippets, etc. And organically, this started to take shape and become something more concrete. And what that allowed us to do was to solve business-specific problems, but with an enterprise-wide mindset. And what that also allowed us to do was to create repeatable patterns and blueprints so that subsequent app teams who wanted to tap into the platforms can really hit the ground running. Now, one of the charter members of this community were our friends at Wood Mackenzie, specifically Philip. He took a lot of interest in this early on and helped drive it forward. So I'll hand it back to him, and he can talk us through their specific cloud journey with Okta.
Okay, thanks, Atul. So to describe the Wood Mackenzie's journey, we need to wind the clock back a little to 2017. We had a small team. We were given an opportunity to reshape our digital estate. At that time, that estate consisted of 118 products across 22 subsystems. Our existing SIAM, that was intertwined with an extensive, cumbersome portal. Everything was brittle, everything was fragile. It was a real hellhole. The business goal of this project was really to create a new public-facing experience that supported various teams in terms of content, as well as to iterate on our initial e-commerce offering. Our technical goal, however, was to really to externalize the SIAM and effectively treat every system as an equal, driving towards a reusable SOIA model. In terms of what we actually managed to deliver at the end of 2017, it was far greater than what we possibly imagined initially. So we managed to isolate all user registration, activation, sign-in, and password reset flows into one single system. We established a core set of APIs, fundamentally supporting our entire ecosystem. We integrated our Okta integration with respect to the back office function. So that workhorse tenant that Atul alluded to, we did a deep integration with that and integrated that with our own employee lifecycle system. And we also, more importantly, established a set of patterns leveraging Okta for the integration to all back office systems, SaaS offerings, and developer tooling. Fundamentally, this work paved the way for the SIAM approach that was to follow later on, but it took a further 8 months to raise that opportunity to re-platform and to move towards Okta for the SIAM. 2018, I think the keynote here was we wrote the first paper on our ideas round about SIAM. We published that internally. A few people were interested in what we had to say, our thinking, our position. A key part of our hypothesis was very much our own journey in terms of driving and adopting cloud. Our key hypothesis was centered on the premise that as more and more customers adopt the cloud-based services in conjunction with the evolution of privacy legislation, we would actually see a greater need for identity platforms in the ecosystem maturing and becoming much more prevalent as our customers matured. Towards sort of the middle of 2018, as Atul mentioned, we kind of all banded together. We started to talk more and more about our ideas, collaboration, and we formed our Verisk SIAM community of interest, essentially bringing business units together who would otherwise remain in their silos and continue to focus on their own business needs. This opportunity kind of came about and really helped us to kind of harness all these kind of different needs from the different aspects of the different businesses and really bring them together and round out a neat set of solutions centered around how we could drive the concept of using Okta for the SIAM. At that stage in 2019, Wood Mackenzie leveraged the Okta professional services in United Kingdom. We held a 3-day workshop. Effectively, it was, I think, deemed to be an extended hackathon style approach where it was very open, very much designed for engineers to ask lots of questions about the platform, to get hands-on experience with the platform, and to build out small prototypes and POCs with the platform. Again, 2019, we had the opportunity to go to Okta in 2019, and we got a couple of the lead engineers to really cement their experience with Okta. on a few of the courses, and really take the concepts that we had built out earlier in the year and really bring them to fruition. Later that year, we signed up with Okta. We instantiated our Okta tenants to support software development life cycles. And towards the end of that year, we had some product releases that moved out. And then back to Wood Mackenzie. So we are on the cusp of going live with Okta for our SIAM. We have migrated and integrated in the region of 120 products across 22 subsystems. We're just doing the final touches to those, and we're ready to move our user base across to the new platform in a few weeks. So what was really the key driver for us? Why did we want to do all of that work? So the short answer is very clear. We want to drive adoption to modern authentication and modern authorization protocols. Standards like OpenID Connect, standards round about federated identity, etc., etc. So that was one key aspect, and really allowing the engineering teams to be efficient with those technologies and drive a very standard approach through the ecosystem. In terms of driving the business maturity as well, I think that was a key aspect and a key concern that we had, that we wanted to leverage everything that was great about the Okta platform in terms of user management, in terms of being able to set up trust relationships with our customers, in terms of federation, and then also giving something back to our customers in terms of giving them some control round about what fields they were willing to share with us and allowing them to control. So that was a key aspect for us that we wanted to really bring to the business. In terms of the capabilities that we've used in Okta, I think it's safe to say we've probably used most of the capabilities that are available to us. And certainly as the Okta platform has matured, we have been pretty early adopters of certain things. Things have worked out really well in some cases, and I think some things we just need a little bit more maturity on the Okta platform, but overall we've been very satisfied. In terms of how we've used these different components, we've heavily used the Okta SDK and services. Really, one of our goals, again, that service-oriented architecture, we've really wanted to encapsulate all our specific business logic, all that logic that's related to our users, the life cycle, our subscriptions, and our life cycle of those subscriptions. We have encapsulated into a set of services which orchestrate Okta through the SDKs and the APIs. More recently, we've made some use of Okta automation and certainly used Okta hooks. Those two features were introduced in Octane 2019. Fantastic features. Again, more recently, we've leveraged some Okta LDAP interface capability round about commercial off-the-shelf solutions. So without going into too much detail there, we found it to be a really handy capability for a drop-in replacement, where normally one would have, say, an LDAP, and we've certainly found it's been like low latency, not many issues round about the interface itself, just a few issues round about the rate limiting on that particular one. The other piece, API and access management, again, we have driven strong adoption round about OpenID Connect. We think that's a fantastic standard to align on, and it gives a very strong direction for our API teams to build out using both coarse-grained and fine-grained scopes to restrict their APIs. And last but not least, we've made full use of the Okta sign-in widget, both hosted as well as self-hosted versions of that sign-in widget. As you can see from the screenshot here, we've opted to host the sign-in experience ourselves, but we're making full use of the hosted sign-in widget hosted on Okta. It just works straight out the box and is very configurable inline, and lets us do a lot of great things that really keeps it on brand. And now I'll hand it back to Atul just to talk a little bit about the actual architecture of the Okta tenant and how we've decomposed this.
Great, thanks, Philip. Great stuff. I did want to take a step back here and talk about our overall architecture, because we want to be able to support all the great work what Mackenzie's doing, but at the same time coexist with all the other application teams and the business lines that want to do similar and play nice together, so to speak, on the shared platform. So that really was one of the first key decisions we had to make is, do we want to do this in a shared tenancy, or do we want to go with what's been referred to as the hub and spoke model, where we have a central tenant hosting the applications, you have spoke tenants hosting various customers aligned to business units. There were some pros and cons to either approach. The hub and spoke presented the opportunity for more isolation from a security standpoint and more customization capabilities from a branding standpoint, which is a bit of a pain point right now. We'll get to that in a moment. But on the other hand, it did introduce the potential for lots and lots of management overhead. When you think about all the business units that we would need to support and different environments on their software development life cycles that we would need to support, it really started to add up in terms of how that would look. And it almost felt like we'd be bringing to the cloud the same problems that we had inherited on premise, which was several different repositories of users somehow stitched together to make it work. So, for now, we're marching forward with the shared tenancy. We're also very confident and hopeful that some of the feature requests and Okta product roadmaps will come into fruition over the next months, which will help get us past some of these technical hurdles that we are facing with the shared tenancy model. But overall, we do think that's the right way to go. We do support 3 types of user provisioning at the moment. Inbound federation, which is highly preferred because it does remove the headache of user management and sort of offloads it to the customers. And also is something that customers tend to want more and more. We also support delegated authentication off of Active Directory domains. Here, the use case is either a transition effort as we move towards more modern authentication means, or in some cases, it is more of a long-term solution due to the nature of the underlying application. And we also, of course, support Okta mastered users, where the users are provisioned and the whole lifecycle happens within Okta itself. What you see over on the upper left there in that Okta cloud, that refers to our workforce tenant. So sometimes I refer to that as customer number 1. We inbound federate using Okta org-to-org into our customer tenant so that any one of our employees who need to consume our customer-facing apps, which there are a lot of, they do that via that federation. Over on the bottom, I highlight some of the administrative and programmatic interfaces. So select members of the business application teams are given role-based access to the tenant. And these are scoped down to typically group admin rights to particular groups and application admin rights to particular applications. We are limited somewhat by the current state of role-based access within Okta. That is a bit of a pain point. We'll touch upon that later. But for now, it does the job. And also for programmatic access, largely around provisioning actions, we grant API tokens for that to function. And these tokens are also scoped down to what they need to do. We'll soon be moving over to OAuth for Okta, which is in EA right now, but looks very promising to allow us to be even more granular with the programmatic access there. We also ship all of the system logs over to Splunk Cloud, which gives us the ability to retain this information for longer periods of time, do further analysis, reporting, and visualization. But also, it's a nice central repository for all logs, since we send application logs, infrastructure logs, logs from AWS, where a lot of these things are being built. All are being aggregated in that one hub, and So it gives opportunities for correlation and just simplifies the, whether it's troubleshooting, whether it's analysis or reporting in one spot. And as I alluded to earlier, a lot of these decisions were made by the community. So we collaborate and figure out what this best model is for us. So that includes things like what is the right security model, the permissions model. Naming conventions becomes very important when you're coexisting in a tenant. So we discussed that and agreed upon that, whether that's for groups, attributes, API components, and so on. Change management is important. So whether it's an Okta feature that we want to introduce into the environment, whether it's a configuration change, we like to scope that as much as possible to specific groups or specific applications. But there are times where the change is a tenant-wide change or an organization-wide change. So we have to be very careful about introducing that into the environment. And so to assist with that, whatever you see here on the screen, you can imagine 2 additional versions of that. So we have a test, acceptance, and production version of what you see here. And that allows exactly that, to introduce safely changes into the environment and also to support development and release processes for our development teams. Let's talk a little bit about some of the success stories. So we've been at this for a bit over a year now, and we've had several successful product go-lives. We are at approximately 200,000 users live in production right now, and we're on track to hit about 500,000 by year end. So very happy with that progress. And we seem to be onboarding new users on a weekly basis, and more applications are being added to the pipeline. And all that's been largely through organic growth. So we're really happy to see that. The users and applications have been a wide range. So we support, as I mentioned earlier, federated users, Okta mastered users, delegated authentication users. The applications are web-based, SAML, OIDC, mobile apps, and even terminal session-based applications. We have a wide range of customers and apps, and we've been able to fit all this into one tenant, which has been great to see. I also wanted to highlight the benefits of our relationship with Okta. So we have Premier level support, which has been great, 24/7 support, dedicated customer success manager. They're always a phone call away. So that's been very helpful to us. Very recently, we signed on to what is called advisory services, which fills a bit of a niche that we find ourselves in often, whereas we had questions that weren't quite the type of things you would ask support, but they didn't quite rise to the level of requiring a professional services engagement. So with advisory services, we have what's essentially a virtual extension to the team, a dedicated engineer, where we can bounce ideas off of, talk through more architectural type questions, and get some of that feedback and best practices to help move us forward. So that's been a really great win for us. As Philip alluded to, we have used professional services on occasion to get some more specific and narrowly scoped projects moving forward. We've taken advantage of developer workshops and developer evangelist events, which has been great to further the cause internally and get developers and the whole community excited about where this is all headed. And lastly, I think the developer website that Okta puts out has been great. It's an excellent resource with documentation, API reference, code snippets, a really great way to quickly get up and running, spinning up your own developer sandbox, very little friction to spin up these environments and to get going right away. So all these things combined have, I think, really helped move this forward and move this forward faster than we probably would have otherwise. And also wanted to tout the benefit of our community model. You know, we have a lot of smart people across the enterprise, and the approach we took there, I think, was really effective in harnessing that collective brain power and moving this forward almost at a grassroots level, which wound up being a lot more effective, I think, than if this was a couple of folks sitting at the top and sort of mandating it top down. I think that probably would have gotten us nowhere. So I think that, in combination with the benefits of the Okta partnership and the feature of the platform itself, really helped move this forward, and really happy with how it's progressed so far. But of course, it's not without its challenges. So I'm going to highlight a few here from my vantage point, sitting here at the center. And a lot of this has to do with finding that right operating model due to the federated nature of our company. and what should be mandatory, what should be optional, what should be driven by the center, what should be self-service by the member companies. It's still a work in progress, and we're somewhat used to that. That's how we have to operate in the cloud in general. We have to be more agile. We have to be more iterative. But something that I'm always mindful of is being careful not to make a certain architectural or configuration decision that would then be very hard to undo, or maybe even impossible to undo. So we have to be very careful, especially in a shared environment, not to be too aggressive in certain types of decisions. But we're figuring things out as we go. A lot of these community-driven decisions, follow along the same lines. Like, at what point does something become, hey, this is how we're going to do things, versus it's okay for one team to do it slightly different than another. In fact, we had a pretty good conversation on this topic yesterday around attributes and profile masters, and it goes back to what I said earlier, being careful not to make a decision that's then hard to undo later on. And then the last point I want to mention here is we've been pretty happy with the organic growth. It's taken off. It's getting out there. But if you go back to what I mentioned earlier about our workforce use case, where that started out as optional and a nice to have, and then over the years became a de facto mandate, a gold standard. How can we do the same with customer identity? What does it take to get there? And I think for that, we will have to get past some of the technical hurdles that we're facing. And for that, to dive deeper, I'm going to hand it back to Philip, who can talk more about that.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Atul. So yeah, I just wanted to really emphasize the view from my perspective. The workforce tenant for us has been absolutely instrumental. It's worked really well using Atul and his great team at the centre in terms of integrating all kind of back office application, developer tools, etc. So we're very, very happy with that. Certainly from the SIAM perspective, I think we're still seeing the platform mature in that space. Certainly been able to leverage a lot of the capability out of the box is fantastic. However, what we're having to compromise on a little bit is around about certain customizations to do with branding, particularly around about certain flows, where we've actually had to maybe do things ourselves where maybe we could have leveraged the out-of-box capability had it been hub and spoke versus a single tenant. But these are all kind of capabilities which I think if we work closely with Okta to mature, we'll get there with those capabilities. Another aspect that's been slightly frustrating, the platform has been moving at a fantastic pace. I mean, looking at all the capabilities that got introduced on Okta in 2019, the platform hasn't stood still. It's been continuing to mature. Some gaps have crept in. We've found that the SDKs haven't perhaps matured as quickly as we would have loved to see them. Authorization code flow with Pixie, for example, just one scenario where that took quite a while to appear. But generally, it's that platform lives and dies by how good the developer experience is. In terms of the using the SIAM for adoption, taking that kind of community view to drive decisions, I think that's worked really well. But I really want to emphasize having that expertise of advisory services, really just to kind of use it almost like as a bumper rail to say, that actually does make sense, or that doesn't make much sense. Have you tried this? I think that's been really, really valuable, having that point of contact to kind of see through some of the decision-making process and helping us get some alignment. I think one challenge, which is more of an internal challenge for Verisk as a whole, and Wood Mackenzie being part of that whole family of companies, is really the organic growth and adoption of Okta is really down to kind of the individuals' collaborative nature. And I think so far we've been very, very fortunate that we've had like-minded people coming together and really coming in open-minded, willing to contribute to the ecosystem. But I think sometimes as well it can be quite difficult to try and get that alignment round about that kind of one Verisk approach without that mandate. But that's something that myself and Atul and our other colleagues around Verisk will help us kind of figure out in due course and make it happen. So getting into very specific technical challenges that we saw. So from an administrative control perspective, we're starting to see this coming through with OAuth for Okta. Certainly, it's coming. We can see it's coming. We can see the direction of travel. That's great. A huge pain point for us, API rate limiting, particularly around about the LDAP interface where we have these commercial off-the-shelf products that work, nicely with a typical LDAP like an AD or another implementation of LDAP. Having the rate limiting on that interface sometimes does surprise those platforms in an adverse way. That's something I think we just kind of need to work with Okta on that one and maybe see if it makes sense for having rate limiting on that particular interface, or having some sort of control and throttling round about that to isolate specific cases where that one problem doesn't take out the whole platform. Okta Invisible, I think it's safe to say that whilst we really love Okta as a platform, we kind of don't really want our customers to worry too much that it's Okta or it's not Okta. So for us, around about customization and around about the flows, the branding, that definitely can be improved. And last but not least, I think for us, the documentation. So there's some really wonderful blog posts out there that pop up, and we look at those religiously. I think a key aspect though is round about the documentation of the SDKs. Again, we feel that we've had to figure out a lot of things sometimes on our own. Through trial and error, and that sometimes can be frustrating for the engineering team. That said, like anything, once you've done it once or twice, it's like riding a bike. You just get on with it and you figure it out. But that again is just something you need to really think about when you're going to do a big implementation like we've been doing across multiple different technologies. That the documentation sometimes just needs that extra little bit of polish just to kind of really help keep it sharp. But generally, I would say, despite those technical challenges, there's been, a lot of very positive, accelerated development with the platform. I mean, where we were 6 months ago compared to where we are now, even prior to that, we've really come on leaps and bounds, and I think so much so that we as a community, we've actually been collaborating across business units and roundabout automation of the setup of Okta. So an example there being running the whole creation of the authorization servers, the creation of the attributes, etc. All of that we have now actually scripted. I've actually got an engineer who is actively investigating how we can use tools like Postman Runner, looking at the integration with Jenkins, to actually try and put a little bit of kind of software-defined architecture wrappers around the very definition and control of Okta, to make it a little bit less sort of manual in terms of the setup, and a little bit more kind of repeatable through that level of automation. So I'll hand it back to Atul to talk about what we're going to be doing conjointly next.
Yeah. So what does the next 12 months look like for us? We're expecting more product go lives. There are a lot of applications in the pipeline. So we're going to march forward with that. We are going to make a more aggressive reach within Verisk, built upon the success stories that we've built to date. And that'll just help reassure people that this is the right way to go. Tied at the hip with that somewhat is what Philip just talked a little bit about, is some of the technical feature requests that we're eagerly waiting for, and we're confident that those will come through, and that'll just make the overall package even better. But largely, we're really excited with what we've built to date, and we're excited about where we're headed. One particular area of focus for myself would be to really strive for more inbound federation with our customers. And of course, this is something where it requires partnership with them. They have to be willing and able. We do service customers across the spectrum, from small single person operations to large enterprises. So we have to, account for that mix. But federation is something we want to really push for, whether it's a new customer we're onboarding or taking an existing customer who had opted for, let's say, Okta Mastered or AD authenticated, and to migrate them towards more of a more modern authentication method. So that is certainly near the top of my list. But with that concludes our presentation. Happy to take questions at this point.